Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name is Cal Fisher, and I've been flying hot air balloons for most of my adult life. People think it's just floating with the wind, but piloting one of these beauties takes skill, timing, and a healthy respect for the weather. I've seen storms that could rip the sky in half, downdrafts that could send you plummeting, and sunrises so vivid they didn't look real. But nothing. Not one storm, not one failed ignition, not one emergency landing prepared me for what happened 12 hours after I took off for a routine sunrise tour. It was supposed to be a quiet morning flight with two tourists, an older couple from Oregon celebrating their anniversary. We were taking off from a remote launch site just outside Santa Fe, the sky still dark when we started the pre-flight checklist. By 6:15 a.m., we were airborne. The sun broke over the mountains in a stunning orange blaze. The couple took pictures, laughed, and asked me questions about altitude and flame control. It was peaceful, serene. But everything changed when I checked the radio. The static was odd. Not the usual faint crackle. This was a buzzing, guttural interference, almost like someone whispering too close to the mic. I flipped to the emergency frequency, and that's when I heard the first broadcast. Emergency lockdown. Stay indoors. Repeat, do not attempt to travel. Outbreak confirmed in multiple states. I glanced at the couple. They were still snapping photos, oblivious. I didn't want to alarm them yet. I calmly said there might be some interference and that we'd check in after landing. But the voice on the radio kept going. Behavioral changes, extreme aggression, do not engage, lock doors, avoid contact. Then it cut to static again. My skin went cold. I've spent years in the air and never heard an alert like that, not even during wildfires or airspace violations. This was different. It wasn't just about safety, it was about survival. We were floating at about 3,000 feet when I noticed something strange on the ground below. Near the highway, a dozen cars were stopped in a tangled mess. Not a fender bender. This looked like people had driven off the road in a panic. Doors left wide open. No one moving. Then we drifted over a small ranch, and my stomach dropped. In the corral, horses were running in circles, wild and uncontained. The barn door was torn off its hinges. Near the house, something, or someone, was staggering through the yard in jerky, unnatural motions. Another figure rushed them, tackling them to the dirt. I turned away. It didn't make sense. None of it did. By 6:45 a.m., I knew we couldn't land. Not yet. I made up a story about strong ground winds and decided to ride the currents for a bit longer. The couple didn't question me. But the truth was settling in like frost creeping across glass. I had no idea what we were descending into. I kept the flame low and tried to float the balloon east, away from the highways and buildings. We drifted over wide fields and dusty plains. That's when the woman pointed toward the horizon and asked, "Are those people?" I looked. There was a large group walking across an open pasture, dozens of them. Staggering, limping, some moving fast, some slow, all heading in the same direction, toward the town. They weren't farmers, they weren't hikers. They didn't move like people at all. We floated silently over them, my hands gripping the burner valves so tightly I thought I'd snap them. The wind carried us away, but the image stuck with me. The way they all turned as if they sensed us overhead, faces lifting toward the sky, blank and twisted. Something terrible was happening down there, and we were running out of time and altitude. By 7:10 a.m., the propane tank was getting low. I had to start thinking about where we could land safely, but the landscape below offered nothing but open fields and abandoned roads. I tried to reach someone on the radio again, anyone, police, search and rescue, another pilot. Nothing but static. Then, finally, a faint signal broke through. A man's voice, frantic. "They're everywhere. They're breaking through the fence. If anyone can hear this, do not come down. I repeat, stay in the air if you can. There's no one left to help." Then screaming. Then silence. The couple heard it this time. I saw the color drain from the husband's face as he looked at me and said, "What's going on?" I didn't know how to answer him. I just kept staring at the ground, watching the shadows crawl. The world was falling apart, and I was floating above it in a basket of fabric and fire. We weren't safe, not up here, not down there. And sooner or later, we were going to have to land. At 7:20 a.m., we were starting to lose altitude. The fuel gauge was dipping into the red, and I could feel the burner weakening. I had about 20 minutes of controlled flight left, maybe less. The air was still calm, but my nerves were anything but. Below us, the world was unraveling. What had started as a peaceful balloon ride had turned into something out of a nightmare, and I was the one responsible for keeping us alive. The older couple, Marvin and Elaine, were trying to stay composed. Marvin was gripping the edge of the basket, knuckles white, eyes darting between me and the ground. Elaine was whispering prayers under her breath. I didn't have the heart to tell them what I'd seen. I scanned the landscape through binoculars, hoping for a miracle, and then I spotted it. A wide, empty field with a small pond in the center, and what looked like an old tractor barn on one end. No movement, no vehicles, no signs of chaos. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best shot we had. "We're going to land," I said, trying to sound calm. "There's an open area ahead. Looks safe." Marvin nodded stiffly. Elaine squeezed his hand. I adjusted the burner and slowly began our descent. The balloon groaned as the fabric shifted in the breeze. As we approached, I kept glancing around. Still no movement. Just dry grass and the pond's glinting surface. But even as I guided us down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We touched down at 7:40 a.m. The basket bounced once, then settled with a thud. I quickly pulled the vent line to collapse the envelope. The balloon sagged behind us like a deflated giant. "We need to move," I said. "Stay close to me." We clambered out of the basket, and I grabbed a fire extinguisher and a utility knife from the storage pouch. It wasn't much, but it felt better than nothing. We made our way toward the old barn, careful to avoid making too much noise. The grass crunched underfoot, dry and brittle. Birds chirped nearby, normal enough, but the silence from everywhere else made them feel out of place. The barn door was unlocked. Inside it was dim, dusty, and empty. A couple of rusted tools hung from the wall, and there were bales of hay stacked near the back. It wasn't a fortress, but it would buy us some time. Once we were inside, I shut the door quietly and wedged a board against it. That's when the smell hit us. It was faint at first, just a hint of rot, like spoiled meat left out in the sun. Marvin gagged. Elaine covered her mouth. "Don't move," I said, holding the extinguisher ready. We crept deeper into the barn, and that's when we saw it. In the far corner, half buried under straw, was a man, or what was left of one. His clothes were torn, face pale and slack, eyes open but unblinking. For a second, I thought he was just gone, until his hand twitched. Marvin stepped back with a gasp. The man groaned, low and guttural. He tried to sit up, but his movements were stiff, jerky, like he wasn't in control of his own limbs. Then he turned his head toward us. His eyes were clouded, unfocused. His mouth opened in a slow slack way, and he made a sound, something between a growl and a moan, that chilled my spine. Elaine whispered, "Is he hurt? Should we help him?" "No," I said, voice firm. "That's not a man anymore." I didn't know how I knew that, but I did. Instinct screamed it at me. Whatever this was, it wasn't just an illness. It had changed him into something else. Something empty. He lunged. Not fast, not like in the movies, just a sudden, violent burst of motion. But it was enough. I stepped in front of Marvin and swung the extinguisher hard. The impact knocked the man backward into the straw, but he didn't cry out or react. He just got back up, arms twitching, mouth still open in that eerie, silent moan. "We need to get out," I hissed. We bolted. I slammed the barn door shut behind us and dragged a rusted plow in front of it. The figure inside threw itself against the door once, then again, then stopped. The couple stared at me, eyes wide. "What is this?" Marvin asked. "I don't know," I said. "But if that's what's waiting for us on the ground, we're in trouble." My hands were shaking. We couldn't stay here, not with fuel gone, and no way to call for help. I pulled out my radio again, desperate for any voice, any instructions. This time, I heard a woman speaking through static. "If you can hear this, head east. Follow the river. Evacuation point is set up at the old fairgrounds. Stay off the roads. Trust no one you don't recognize." The transmission cut out, followed by more static. East, that was our only option. I turned to the couple. "We're leaving. Now." Elaine hesitated. "But that thing in the barn. What if there are more?" "There are more," I said. "And they're not just in barns. They're everywhere." We began moving. The sky was bright and cloudless. Birds still sang, as if the world wasn't falling apart under them. But I knew, with every step, that we were walking through something that had changed everything forever. And the only way to survive the next hour was to keep moving. By the time we left the barn, it was close to 8 a.m. The sun had climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the fields, but the warmth it brought didn't touch the chill spreading in my chest. We headed east, as the radio voice had instructed, keeping low and avoiding open ground. I led the way, utility knife in one hand, fire extinguisher in the other. Marvin and Elaine followed close behind, barely speaking. Every so often, we stopped to listen. The wind rustled the grass, a bird flitted from one bush to another, but there were no voices, no engines, no planes overhead. The world had gone quiet. Too quiet. Eventually, we found a shallow creek cutting through the land, dry in some places, but still flowing in others. I figured it might be the river mentioned on the radio, or at least something that fed into it. It was a start. As we followed the water line, we came across a wrecked pickup truck half submerged in the mud. The doors were open, windshield cracked, and one of the tires still spun lazily. There were long drag marks in the dirt nearby, leading away from the vehicle and into the tall grass. Marvin moved to investigate, but I held out a hand. "Don't," I whispered. "If something happened here, whatever did it might still be close." He nodded, swallowing hard. We gave the truck a wide berth and kept moving. At 8:30 a.m., we saw the first sign of a town, just the edge of a distant water tower poking above the trees. I figured it had to be a small rural community, the kind where everybody knows each other and the streets roll up by 9 o'clock. I hoped that was a good thing. I hoped we'd find people, help, answers. Instead, we found silence. The first house we passed had its door wide open. The windows were shattered. A child's bicycle lay on its side in the driveway, its back wheel still spinning. We didn't stop. We didn't call out. We just kept walking. As we moved deeper into the neighborhood, it became clear that something terrible had swept through this place like a storm. Cars were abandoned in the middle of the road. Some had their trunks popped as if people had packed in a rush. Others were crashed, mangled into fences and mailboxes. Then came the smell. Faint at first, then stronger. A sour, rotting stench that curled into your nose and settled in your throat. Elaine covered her mouth and turned away. Marvin looked like he was about to be sick. I tried a few radios we found along the way, inside vehicles, outside gas stations, but all we heard was static. Whatever had happened, it had happened fast. By 9 a.m., we reached what looked like the main street. A general store stood at the corner, its windows smashed, shelves ransacked. We stepped inside cautiously and I found a few bottles of water still sealed, plus a flashlight and an old hand-crank radio. That's when we heard the first scream. It was far off, maybe 3 or 4 blocks away, but it echoed off the buildings like a warning. A sharp, panicked cry followed by another sound. Something like growling. A terrible chorus of howls and footsteps pounding pavement. We ducked behind the shelves. More screams followed, then silence. Marvin leaned close. "We need to get out of this town." "No argument here," I said. "But we need to know which way the fairgrounds are. That's our only shot." I twisted the crank on the radio and turned the dial slowly. Most frequencies were dead. Then, finally, a scratchy voice came through. "This is Station 4. If you're hearing this, evacuate to the fairgrounds off Route 12. Ground is secure. Armed personnel in place. Do not stop. Avoid groups. Travel only in daylight. Over." I repeated the words to Marvin and Elaine. Route 12. That meant getting out of the center of town and heading southeast. We started moving again, staying low and quiet, ducking through alleyways and backyards. I kept checking corners, listening for footsteps, for breathing that didn't belong to us. Around 9:30 a.m., we passed an old fire station. Its garage door was wide open, one truck missing. The other sat inside, its windshield streaked with red. The building was empty, or so I thought. As we crept past, we heard it. A low thump, then another, then dragging sounds. I peered inside, and there it was. One of them. It was a man in a firefighter's coat, the gear hanging off him like it was too big. His head was tilted at a crooked angle, his jaw slack, and his eyes empty, no light, no recognition. He started moving toward us, slow at first, then faster. We ran. Marvin nearly tripped, but I yanked him back to his feet. Elaine clutched my arm like a lifeline. We cut through the side of a bakery, leapt over a toppled display, and slammed through the back door into an alley. Behind us, more movement. Not just one now, 2, 3, more. Their groans were low and guttural, like animals trying to remember how to speak. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. We sprinted down the alley, rounded a corner and saw it. The road sign for Route 12. We were close, but they were gaining on us. We hit Route 12 running, lungs on fire, hearts pounding. Behind us, the groans had turned to snarls. Every instinct told me not to look, but I did. Just once. A dozen of them were pouring from the alley, stumbling and lurching, but fast. Faster than I expected. Not sprinting, but not slow either. Enough to make your stomach twist when you realized they weren't going to stop. "Go," I shouted, waving Marvin and Elaine forward. "Don't stop. Keep moving." The fairgrounds couldn't be far. The radio had said to follow Route 12. I just hoped we weren't already too late. The road curved around a hill, and the terrain opened into farmland. golden fields and pastures with rusted fences. In the distance, I saw them. Tall poles, floodlights, a Ferris wheel rising like a broken crown above the trees. "There!" I pointed. "That's it." We pushed on, feet pounding pavement. My shoulders ached, my breath came in ragged gasps, and the fire extinguisher felt heavier with every step. But I didn't let go. That thing had already saved us once. As we reached a bend in the road, I spotted a small white sign County Fairgrounds 1 mile ahead. We were close. So close. Then a shot rang out. I skidded to a stop, nearly tripping. A second shot cracked through the air louder than the first. It came from up ahead, from the tree line to the left of the road. I dropped to one knee and pulled Marvin and Elaine down beside me. We huddled behind a rusted-out tractor left at the edge of a cornfield. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear. Then a voice shouted, "Identify yourselves." I hesitated, then stood up slowly, arms raised. "We're alive," I called. "Not infected. We're just trying to reach the fairgrounds." There was a pause. Leaves rustled. Then 2 figures stepped into view, one in camo, the other in a sheriff's uniform. Both held rifles. The sheriff, a tall man with a grizzled beard and wary eyes, squinted at us. "You 3 from town?" "No," I said. "We were up in the air when it started, balloon ride. We've been on foot ever since." He studied us for another long moment, then lowered his weapon. "You're lucky. Come on, we've got a checkpoint just up the road." Relief poured over me like cool rain. We followed them quickly, glancing back every few seconds in case the ones from town had caught up. Within minutes, we reached a makeshift barricade strung across the road. Barrels, cones, and a parked SUV blocking the way. More armed people stood guard, most in plain clothes with hunting rifles, others in police uniforms. A few had radios crackling on their belts. The sheriff waved us through and spoke to a man behind the SUV. 3 more, alive, came from the west. The man, who looked like some kind of organizer, nodded. "Check them for bites, then bring them inside." I didn't argue. We stood still while they checked us, arms, legs, neck, even under our sleeves. Marvin flinched, but he didn't say a word. Once cleared, we were ushered through the gates and into the fairgrounds. It was like a different world. Tents were pitched across the grass. People moved in quiet, purposeful patterns. Some sorting supplies, others watching the perimeter. A few children huddled together near the edge of the carousel, wrapped in sleeping bags. Everyone looked scared, tired, and unsure. But they were alive. That counted for something. A woman named Tanya brought us water and protein bars. "You're safe here," she said. "For now. We've got food, light, and a few working radios. No one comes in without being checked." "Is there a plan?" I asked. "Military? Rescue?" She sighed. "We've heard reports. Some bases are still holding, but most big cities are." She paused, searching for a safer word. "Compromised. The best thing we can do is wait, stay quiet, and hope this thing burns out." I didn't say it, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to burn out anytime soon. Elaine sat down next to a propane heater, her eyes glazed over. Marvin hadn't spoken in a while. I wandered the grounds trying to gather what info I could. There were only a few dozen of us in total. Most had arrived during the night, escaping on foot or in farm trucks. A few came from the same town we'd passed through, those who'd seen what the outbreak looked like up close. According to one survivor, it all started with a man at the local clinic. He'd come in with a strange fever, unresponsive, and then turned. Attacked 2 nurses before anyone knew what was happening. From there, it spread like wildfire. No one knew how. No one knew why. I kept scanning the skies out of habit, half expecting to see helicopters, planes, some sign of rescue. But there was nothing. Just the clouds slowly thickening overhead. By 10:30 a.m., the sheriff called a meeting under the main tent. "We're doing everything we can to keep this place secure," he said, hands on his hips. "But if we get overwhelmed, we run. You hear me? No heroes. If the fences go, we don't fight, we flee." There were murmurs of agreement. No one liked it, but no one argued. A woman in the back raised her hand. "What if we run out of food?" "We won't," Tanya answered. "We've sent a team to the feed store and gas station. They'll be back before sundown." That answer didn't reassure me. Not really. I walked the perimeter one more time, staring through the wire fence toward the trees. I saw movement once, just a flicker, but it was enough to keep me on edge. And then, at exactly 11 a.m., the wind shifted, carrying with it a sound that chilled my blood. Screams. Dozens of them, coming from the north side of the fairgrounds. The screams tore through the fairgrounds like a siren. I froze mid-step, every muscle tensing. Then came the sound of people running. Panicked footfalls, calls for help, radios crackling. I spun toward the noise, past the carousel, toward the livestock barns. A wall of people surged from the north fence. Some were guards. Some were civilians. All of them were running. Behind them, just visible through the gaps in the trees, figures were charging out of the woods, fast and unrelenting. One of the perimeter spotters, a teenager barely old enough to shave, fired a shot. It went wide. A second later, he was tackled. We didn't even have time to react. "Fall back! Get to the center!" someone shouted. I grabbed Elaine's arm and yanked her away from the heater. Marvin came to, eyes wide with terror, and bolted after us. The outer fences collapsed like paper under the weight of the horde. They were spilling into the fairgrounds now, too many to count. Some still looked almost human. Others were twisted, as if the change had broken them. Their eyes were blank, their mouths opened wide. I could hear them, not just groaning, clicking, like something deep in their throats was stuck, chattering without rhythm. The sheriff and 3 others stood their ground with rifles, holding the horde back as long as they could. Then the ammo ran out. Tanya rushed past us, shouting into a radio. They breached the livestock gate, everyone to the emergency trailers. Emergency trailers? I didn't wait to ask. We joined the crowd surging across the fairgrounds, dodging overturned food stands and scattered equipment. I saw the Ferris wheel ahead, looming over several aluminum trailers with government stickers and red cross markings. They must have been brought in for first aid or weather response. Now they were the last line of defense. Marvin tripped. I stopped and hauled him back to his feet. Elaine took a swing at one of the infected with a folding chair. It barely slowed the thing down, but it was enough for us to scramble past. By the time we reached the trailers, the scene was chaos. People were pounding on doors. Others were climbing onto the roofs. The infected were everywhere, pushing through the crowd like wild animals. Then I remembered the balloon. I grabbed Elaine's wrist. "Follow me!" Marvin was coughing hard, barely keeping up, but he followed as I led them behind the trailers, toward the edge of the field where we'd stowed the backup balloon. I'd seen it earlier near a storage shack, packed but not deflated completely. It wasn't ideal, but it might be our only shot. "We're taking off?" Marvin wheezed. "If we stay down here, we're done." I reached the balloon, still tethered loosely to a truck hitch. The basket was ready, burner intact, 2 small propane tanks attached. I hadn't planned on flying it again today, but there was no time for planning anymore. I untangled the lines with shaking hands. Elaine helped, clipping the ropes free as Marvin climbed in and collapsed. I could see blood on his sleeve, scraped, not bitten, but I'd check it later. Elaine fired the burner. The flames roared to life, loud and brilliant. The heat rippled across my skin. The balloon lurched, groaned, and started to rise. That was when one of them spotted us. She charged across the field, an older woman, hair matted with dirt and blood, teeth bared. Elaine screamed, but the burner masked most of it. The woman slammed into the basket as we lifted off. I swung the fire extinguisher. It connected with a heavy crack. She went down, unmoving, and the balloon lifted. We rose slowly, just above the trailer rooftops. I looked down and saw the fairgrounds swallowed in chaos, people scattering, infected chasing them in every direction. We were too low. Another few seconds, and we'd be out of reach. Then a hand grabbed the side of the basket. One of them had climbed onto a nearby truck and leapt. His fingers curled over the edge, nails digging into the wicker. He snarled, no words, just instinct. Elaine tried to kick him. I swung the extinguisher again, this time catching him right between the eyes. He fell, and we rose. Higher and higher, the roar of the burner like a dragon overhead. The ground fell away, shrinking beneath us. The fairgrounds, the trees, the roads, they all became tiny beneath the gentle sway of the balloon. I didn't stop burning until we were several hundred feet up, high enough to see the horizon stretch in every direction. The infected couldn't reach us here, not unless they grew wings. Marvin lay against the side of the basket, pale but breathing. Elaine stared in silence, her arms around herself. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the skies. Smoke. Lots of it. Pillars rising from the south, the east. Maybe towns, maybe cities. Maybe places like the fairgrounds, overrun and lost. But we were still here, still floating, still alive. And we had the sky. The world below was quiet in the way only the sky can make it. From up here, it almost didn't seem real, like everything down there was just a bad memory. But that illusion didn't last long. I could see roads clogged with abandoned cars, some still smoldering. I could see homes with the doors flung wide open, and in the distance, rising from the outskirts of a small town, thick black smoke curled into the clouds. Marvin coughed, stirring beside me. I turned to check him again. His arm was bandaged with strips from Elaine's scarf. Just a bad scrape. We'd cleaned it with some bottled water we found in the basket supply box, but his color still wasn't great. "How you holding up?" I asked. He gave a weak thumbs up. Never liked heights, but I like the ground even less right now. Elaine managed a small, tired laugh. The balloon swayed gently in the wind. The burner hissed every few minutes, keeping us at altitude. We were drifting westward, slow, steady, peaceful. But that peace, it was laced with dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Back at the fairgrounds, everything had fallen apart in less than an hour. And from the looks of the smoke trails dotting the countryside, we weren't the only ones who'd faced it. "What now?" Elaine asked after a while. Her voice was low, tired. I looked down at the map I'd stuffed in the side pocket of the basket. It was an old one, mostly for tourists, but it showed the key landmarks. There were a few airfields nearby, some small rural towns, and one emergency services tower marked with a red cross and a phone symbol. There's a small county medical station about 15 miles west. If it's still standing, they might have communication gear, or at least shelter. Elaine nodded slowly. "And if it's not? Then we keep drifting," I said. "Keep moving. Stay ahead of whatever's spreading." I didn't say them. I didn't need to. The clouds thickened above us, casting long shadows across the basket. We were still high, but I'd started watching the propane gauge. We couldn't stay up forever. I thought about the people we'd left behind. Sheriff Turner, Tanya, the radio guy. We hadn't seen them make it to the trailers. Maybe they did. Maybe not. But we had to keep moving. For them. For ourselves. Elaine leaned over the side, squinting down at a field. Is that someone waving? I looked. Sure enough, far below, a figure was out in the open, waving both arms, trying to get our attention. Next to them, another balloon, partially inflated, tethered to a flatbed. I didn't know if they were survivors. I didn't know if it was a trap. But we had to take the chance. I gave a short blast of the burner, then started adjusting the vents, slowly descending in wide circles. You sure about this? Marvin asked. Nope, I said. But we can't stay up here forever. As the balloon lowered, the wind caught us again, tugging us gently westward. The figure below kept waving, now joined by two more. They looked small from this height, but they didn't move like the ones we saw back at the fairgrounds. We weren't safe, we weren't rescued. But we weren't alone. And in this new world, that meant something. As we descended toward the next unknown, I kept one hand on the burner, the other on the edge of the basket. Eyes open, heart steady, still alive. For now. And that was enough. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.